father died, and whenever I talk about her, and I should because she was so wicked.
In life, we can count on 3 certainties: death, taxes, and Hollywood's ability to bury the truth. But today, we'll be flipping the rocks on some of Tinseltown's biggest legends to reveal 10 shocking secrets about Golden Age icons that you won't believe. Number 10. Gene Kelly's mistreatment of Debbie Reynolds. Released in 1952, Singin' in the Rain has earned its place as one of cinema's most celebrated classics. Admired for its iconic dance scenes, charismatic performances, witty take on Hollywood, and an enduringly uplifting spirit. Yet Debbie Reynolds revealed that its filmmaking was one of the toughest experiences of her life, second only to giving birth. It makes you wonder what exactly made it so challenging. Walk with me here. Debbie Reynolds was first noticed by talent scouts from Warner Brothers and MGM at the 1948 Miss Burbank contest, where both studios were eager to sign her. To decide the winner, both studios agreed to flip a coin, with Warner Brothers winning the toss. She spent 2 years at Warner Brothers, but when the studio ceased making musicals, she moved over to MGM. During the 1950s, Debbie Reynolds became a staple in the studio's movie musicals and also enjoyed success as a recording artist. One of her biggest hits, Abba Dabba Honeymoon, made history as the first soundtrack to become a top-of-the-chart gold record, climbing to 3rd on the Billboard charts. Her performance in 2 Weeks with Love left such a strong impression on MGM that the studio cast her in a co-starring role in Singin' in the Rain when she was just 18. It co-starred Gene Kelly, whom she called a great dancer and cinematic genius, adding that he taught her the discipline and dedication required in show business. But hey, when are we ever going to learn? Before her passing, Debbie Reynolds revealed that working with the star of Don Lockwood was anything but a dream. He was terrible and made the set a literal hell. How, you ask? Well, contrary to expectations, Kelly didn't want Reynolds to be his co-star. He had a strong dislike for the studio call-up and criticized everything Reynolds did. In her 2013 memoir, Unsinkable, Debbie Reynolds revealed that she had only 3 months to learn the intricate dance routines for Singin' in the Rain. But instead of offering guidance, Gene Kelly's approach was far from nurturing. His harsh, tyrannical behavior made him more of a bully, directing his criticism not only at Reynolds, but also at other co-stars, though the former bore most of the brunt. Gene Kelly never offered any encouragement and harshly criticized every move she made during rehearsals. Worse, he pushed Debbie Reynolds to her breaking point. According to multiple accounts, the Good Morning number took a grueling 15 hours to complete, and by the end of it, Reynolds' feet were bleeding and she was unable to move. She was confined to bed rest mandatorily for 2 days afterward. The work pressures were so severe on Debbie Reynolds that she made a habit of hiding under the piano on set to cry her heart out. Fred Astaire, who was also at MGM filming another movie, found her there and offered reassurance. He reminded her that she would get through it and explained that the intense effort, every drop of sweat, blood, and tears, was simply part of the journey to mastering her craft. Although Debbie Reynolds and Gene Kelly eventually developed a friendly relationship, he once did something that left her feeling repulsed. It was a kissing scene in which Kelly forced his tongue into her mouth, an act she described as feeling like an assault. There was one time she truly expressed her shock, noting that she couldn't believe the then 39-year-old actor would treat her that way. Thankfully, though, Reynolds won the mental battle. Like Astaire predicted, every drop of sweat, blood, and tears refined Reynolds. Her 70-year career was littered with success. She received a Golden Globe nomination for Most Promising Newcomer for her role as Helen Kane in the 1950 film 3 Little Words. Other notable successes included The Affairs of Dobie Gillis, Susan Slept Here, and Bundle of Joy, for which she received another Golden Globe nomination, and The Catered Affair, which won her the National Board of Review's Best Supporting Actress award. In the 1957 film Tammy and the Bachelor, Reynolds' rendition of the song Tammy soared to the top of the Billboard charts. While many of her peers struggled to gain momentum in the 1970s, Debbie Reynolds' television career was still getting critical recognition. Her series, The Debbie Reynolds Show, got a Golden Globe nomination in 1969, and 4 years later, she starred in a Broadway revival of the musical Irene, which brought her a Tony Award nomination for Best Leading Actress in a Musical. Later, Reynolds' work in the popular sitcom Will and Grace led to a Primetime Emmy nomination for Outstanding Guest Actress in a Comedy Series. Apart from her Hollywood endeavors, Reynolds also had a string of successful business ventures. She owned a dance studio, a casino, and a hotel in Las Vegas. And yes, she served as president of the Thalians, an organization dedicated to mental health causes. Following her recognition with the Screen Actors Guild Life Achievement Award and the Jean Hersholt Humanitarian Award in 2015 and 2016, Debbie Reynolds marked her final film appearance in the biographical documentary Bright Lights. She passed away in December of that year to a hemorrhagic stroke, a day after the death of her daughter, actress Carrie Fisher. Surprised to hear about her shocking mistreatment, though? Just wait till you find out the mind-blowing secret of the next actor on our list. It's one of the reasons why she's a largely forgotten icon, especially in the place of her birth.
Mrs. Langley, would you come on Friday for tea at my mother's? I'd like her to meet you.
What's that cup?
Number 9. Merl Oberon hid her true ethnicity. Best remembered as Catherine Earnshaw, the faded heroine in the 1939 classic romance Wuthering Heights, Merl Oberon took the world by storm. Her striking beauty, raven hair, almond-shaped eyes, tan skin, and a rosebud mouth made her a captivating presence on the silver screen. Despite her finest acting, Oberon scandalized Hollywood tabloids with her love affairs and fascinating marriages. But there was a burning secret she hid most, one that she kept until her final breath. On paper, Merl Oberon claimed that she was born in Tasmania, an island state of Australia in the Pacific. In truth, she was born in Bombay, British India. Her father, a British Army officer, passed away in a hunting accident, after which she was raised in Bombay by her aristocratic godparents. Her mother was part Sinhalese and part Maori. Oberon was affectionately nicknamed Queenie by her family, as she was born during Queen Mary and King George's visit to India. To protect her from the challenges her background might bring, her grandmother took on the role of her mother, raising her as her own child and persuading Oberon that her young mother was actually her half-sister. But that wasn't enough to shield Oberon from the relentless taunts over her mixed heritage. After relocating to Calcutta at the age of 3, Oberon earned a scholarship to one of the city's top all-girls schools. Unfortunately, she was soon driven out by the overt racism of her classmates. Seeking refuge, she turned to films and the vibrant nightlife, with the art of pretending to be her window to cope and survive. She later got into the Calcutta Amateur Theatrical Society. Much like the actors in her era, the inspiration to become a professional actor came from one of her predecessors, Vilma Bonke, whom she watched in the 1925 silent film The Dark Angel. She moved to France 3 years later, where an army colonel introduced her to director Rex Ingram, who offered her small roles in his films. Oberon's mother, Charlotte Selby, who had darker skin, followed her as her maid. While seeking acting roles in British silent films, Oberon mostly worked as a club hostess. Ingram would later cast her as an extra in the drama The Three Passions, filmed on the French Riviera. Over the next 5 years, she worked mainly in background roles, appearing as an extra or in uncredited parts in both silent and sound films. While Oberon once remarked that she couldn't dance, sing, write, or paint, she knew she was blessed with a photogenic face. Though not unique, her standout feature caught the eye of Alexander Korda, the Hungarian producer, director, and screenwriter who signed her to a studio contract. Korda not only became her mentor and lover, but also her husband. He tamed traits like her accent that would have given away her South Asian origins. Soon after her debut as a leading actress, Oberon caught the sniff of Samuel Goldwyn, who gladly lured her to Hollywood. She starred in his 1935 Oscar-winning production, The Dark Angel, which also earned Oberon a Best Actress nomination. Thanks to her Oriental features, Oberon was considered an exotic beauty. She was a stark contrast to the blonde-haired, green-eyed, and ivory-skinned Hollywood glam queens that viewers were starting to deem iterative. Still, she never let the cat out of the bag. Her secret was the price of success in show business during a time when the U.S. government was focused on cracking down on indecency. Rather than wait for lawmakers to intervene, Hollywood took matters into its own hands by implementing the Hays Code, which, among other restrictions, specifically condemned interracial romance. So when Oberon's early work with Corda, whom she eventually married, led to a successful career under Samuel Goldwyn, it became in everyone's best interest to keep her identity a mystery. Even when times changed and Hollywood's aversion toward interracial romance began to relax, Oberon was still committed to her lie and quickly tightened up when it unraveled. It was so bad that even when her nephew, Michael Corda, who was the editor-in-chief at Simon & Schuster at the time, attempted to write a biography about Oberon, she threatened to sue him and cut him out of her will if he used real details. This forced him to turn the project into the Romana Clef Queenie, which became an ABC miniseries. Number 8. The shocking scandal that shook Hollywood. Hollywood in the early 1920s was an exciting time to be alive. There was glamour, iconic films, and some of the greatest stars in history were on the horizon. Who would have one event that was all it took to forever change the image of the silent film era and taint the life of one of its biggest stars? Roscoe Fatty Arbuckle, for all of his flaws, was loved for all of his comedic roles and jovial personality. Yet he was at the center of a scandal so shocking that it left the entire industry reeling. But what really happened? Was Arbuckle the victim of a conspiracy, or was there something far darker at play? To answer the lingering questions, we'd have to circle back to the very beginning. As one of the first stars to emerge from the acting industry, Fatty Arbuckle struck gold in silent movies. Together with Mabel Normand, Arbuckle invented the pie-in-the-face gag that has been redone in countless movies since. And yes, he was one of the Keystone Cops, which were a series of movies showing bumbling policemen. The idiom is still used today for inept police forces. Fast forward to the summer of 1921 when Arbuckle was on top of the world. His latest comedy, Crazy to Marry, was playing in packed theaters nationwide, and Paramount Pictures had just signed him to an extraordinary $3 million contract over 3 years, with plans for him to star in 18 silent films. To celebrate his success, Arbuckle's friend, Fred Fishbach, organized a lavish 3-day Labor Day party at the St. Francis Hotel in San Francisco. But by the end of the week, Fatty Arbuckle was locked up in cell number 12 on Felony Row at the San Francisco Hall of Justice, held without bail, and accused of the tragic death of 25-year-old actress Virginia Rapp. But what exactly happened? On September 5, 1921, Arbuckle hosted a lavish party at the St. Francis Hotel in San Francisco, graced by various guests, including Virginia Rapp. After consuming a significant amount of alcohol, the actress was found in a severely ill state in Arbuckle's hotel room. She was quickly taken to the hospital, where she ultimately died from peritonitis caused by a ruptured bladder. Little did we know the circumstances surrounding her death would set off a series of events that no one could have predicted. First off, the entire incident was a tragic case of being in the wrong place at the wrong time. And secondly, the press vilified the silent actor. Hollywood was already viewed as a place of scandal, and rumors quickly spread that Arbuckle had assaulted Rapp with a Coke bottle. The sensationalist tabloid press seized on the story, fueled it with lies, and provoked public outrage. Nothing he did seemed to calm the storm. The press had already painted him as a monster, shaping public opinion before any legal process could unfold. He became the villain number one in the eyes of the public, and no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't escape the backlash. Arbuckle was charged with molestation and manslaughter, and it took 3 trials to exonerate him. The first 2 trials ended in hung juries with no clear verdict in sight. The proceedings were highly controversial, with evidence suggesting that Rapp may have had a pre-existing medical condition that could have caused her bladder to rupture. Yet the media continued to paint Arbuckle as guilty, relentlessly tarnishing his reputation. Despite the confusion and conflicting accounts of the events, Arbuckle was finally exonerated in the 3rd trial. The jury deliberated for only 6 minutes before returning a unanimous not guilty verdict. The judge even issued a public statement expressing that Arbuckle had suffered injustice as there was no proof to support the accusations. Sadly, the damage was irreversible. Arbuckle's career was gone with the wind. Hollywood, under pressure from the Motion Picture Producers and Distributors of America, banned him from working in film, and copies of his movies were destroyed to ensure they would never be seen again. Despite this, Arbuckle tried to rebuild his life. With the help of friends like Buster Keaton, he found some work behind the scenes as a director, but the magic of his earlier career was gone. He lived in relative obscurity, marrying twice more, and struggling to regain his footing. He even made a brief comeback in 1932 when he signed a contract with Warner Brothers, but fate had other plans. On June 29, 1933, Arbuckle died of a heart attack at the age of 46, marking a tragic end to one of the greatest victims of mob rule, mendacity, and injustice. The Fatty Arbuckle scandal remains one of Hollywood's most shocking moments, not just for the tragedy that occurred, but for the way it showed the darker side of fame. It was one of the first eye-openers to how Hollywood and the media could discard anyone once they became expendable. Following Arbuckle's trial and acquittal, Universal was the first studio to insert so-called morality clauses in actors' contracts. It gave them the right to effectively terminate or punish defaulting actors whose behaviors were deemed immoral or scandalous. But while the rules seemed good on paper, they ended up causing a myriad of problems for the actors involved. The stringent control over their careers and personal lives created an environment ripe for exploitation. This brings us to the next hidden truth of Hollywood that we're about to uncover.
A mean one, wasn't she? Well, you didn't know her, thank goodness. But she used to, she was very jealous.
Number 7. Judy Garland's abortions. Similar to today, in old Hollywood, the decisions surrounding women's bodies were largely made by men, the powerful studio heads at MGM, Paramount Pictures, Warner Brothers, and RKO, who once held the reins of the industry. Remember Aubrey Malone's shocking quote in The Treatment of Women in the Film Industry? Throughout the 1900s, the industry's unwritten rule was as clear as day. If you want to play in this business, you play like a man or you're out. And if you happen to be a woman, better not mention it to anybody. In light of this, old Hollywood demanded two things from its female stars. First, they were required to embody the kind of sensuality that icons like Marilyn Monroe and Rita Hayworth epitomized. Second, they had to maintain an innocent image off-screen, as it was believed that mothers couldn't sell in the same way. This led to the creation of the so-called morality clauses in 1922, conceived by Will H. Hayes. In collaboration with the studios, these clauses required top stars to sign agreements ensuring their personal lives would not jeopardize their public image. A pregnancy, planned or unplanned, was seen as a threat that could strip away the carefully crafted glamour Hollywood had worked so hard to establish. And these contracts quickly became a means of exerting control over the stars. Surprise, surprise, backstreet abortions became tragically common, with studio heads often encouraging them in their desperate attempts to maintain the pristine image of their silver screen stars. And no, it wasn't just about having kids. Legend has it that blonde bombshell Jean Harlow was prevented from wedding William Powell because MGM had written a clause into their contract forbidding her to marry. A wife couldn't be a bombshell, after all. It didn't exactly stop her from seeing her lover, though. Harlow kept the relationship going and even got pregnant, though she mysteriously went to a hospital to treat an, illness. A similar scenario occurred when Jeanette MacDonald had an abortion when she was treated for an ear infection, and Judy Garland's own mother conspired with studios to ensure she also went under the knife. It was an epidemic problem in an age supposed to be the most dazzling and opulent era of Hollywood's industry. MGM studio head Louis B. Mayer, in particular, was so blunt that he would tell his stars to get rid of the problem whenever pregnancy reared its head. Reflecting on the prevalence, an anonymous actress once described abortions as our birth control, a chilling testament to how women in the industry were treated. For all of Hollywood's abortion flaws, I can't help but feel it affected Judy Garland the most. Her death at the age of 47 personified the culmination of a tragic thread that ran through her life from its very beginning, when her own mother tried to abort her, the youngest of 3 daughters. From weight choices to imagery, Garland was never free to make her own choices. When Judy Garland became pregnant by her lover, actor Tyrone Power, in 1943, her mother Ethel, in collaboration with the studio, arranged for her to undergo an abortion. Audiences loved her as a child, not as a mother. These experiences, among others, left deep psychological scars on Garland, making her one of the first public casualties of the intense pressures of stardom. Want to know the worst part, though? Hollywood never cared about the health or safety of its starlets. Rumors went rife that some of these Hollywood fixers were ill-equipped and shady. If you think about it, old Hollywood is a sick joke. Women had a staggering amount of power, with their performances and beauty propelling studios to wealth and them to imaginable fame and fortune. Yet they were denied control over their own bodies. Studio executives and powerful men in the industry stripped them of their autonomy by dictating everything about their lives. Judy Garland, in particular, suffered significantly. She had 5 failed marriages, was a victim of substance abuse, faced financial hardship at the end of her life, and was no stranger to harassment throughout her acting career. Add to that the fact that she faced enforced abortion early in her life when she wanted to have a baby, and you've got one of the industry's cruelest human rights abuse victims. Number 6. John Huston's Manslaughter. Director, screenwriter, and actor John Huston was one of old Hollywood's most celebrated figures, known for writing and directing classics that shaped cinema history. With 2 Academy Awards, 3 Golden Globes, and a BAFTA Fellowship, his legacy seemed untouchable. But while most know him for his artistic achievements, did you know he once committed manslaughter? That's right. This shocking piece of Huston's past isn't widely known, especially among younger generations. Back in the day, Huston was one of Hollywood's most notorious drinkers. He was wild, erratic, loved booze, and lived on the fast lane, literally. Remember his romantic relationship with the actress Zita Johann? Their affair in the early 30s was famous for exuberance and off-screen chemistry, until a serious incident switched the entire narrative. While driving drunk with Johann as passenger, Huston hit a parked car that sent the actress through the glass windshield. She suffered head injuries, and Huston was charged with driving under the influence. While you'd think the near-death experience would make Huston rethink his life choices, the stubborn actor had other plans that almost cost him his career. In 1933, Huston was involved in yet another tragic car accident that resulted in the death of actress Tosca Roulian, the wife of actor Paul Roulian. There was a rumor that Clark Gable was actually responsible for the accident and that MGM's Eddie Mannix paid Huston to take the blame. However, this has long been debunked, as Gable was in another location shooting for a film. Although a coroner's jury cleared Huston of any wrongdoing, the event deeply affected him. Overwhelmed by guilt, he left Hollywood and spent time drifting through London and Paris. By 1937, at age 31, John Huston came back to Hollywood, this time with serious ambitions as a writer. He had recently married Leslie Black and started working as a scriptwriter with Warner Brothers. Huston wasn't just looking to write, he had a long-term goal to direct his own screenplays. Over the next few years, he co-wrote scripts for some major films like Jezebel, The Amazing Dr. Clitterhouse, Juarez, Dr. Ehrlich's Magic Bullet, and Sergeant York. His work on Dr. Ehrlich's Magic Bullet and Sergeant York earned him Academy Award nominations, cementing his reputation as a talented screenwriter. In fact, Sergeant York became one of Howard Hawks' most celebrated films, especially with Gary Cooper's standout performance. Recognized and respected in Hollywood, Huston managed to convince Warner Brothers to let him try his hand at directing, on the condition that his next script, High Sierra, would be a success. With a stroke of luck and major talent, the film became a major hit, just as Huston had hoped. Keeping their promise, Warner Brothers allowed Huston to choose his first directing project, Dashiell Hammett's The Maltese Falcon, a detective thriller that had already been adapted twice by Warner Brothers with little success. Huston promised a fresh approach to Hammett's novel and its success, music to the ears of the studio head, Jack L. Warner. While the film turned out to be a major success and is now regarded as a classic in film noir, did you know that the actor also served in the U.S. Army during World War II? Yes, in 1942, Huston joined the Army Signal Corps, where, as a captain, he directed 3 impactful war documentaries, Report from the Aleutians, The Battle of San Pietro, and Let There Be Light. His films, which captured the grim realities of war and its psychological toll, were banned from public viewing due to the ethics of filming the soldiers' recovery and the lack of written permission supplied by Huston. For his service, Houston was promoted to Major and awarded the Legion of Merit for his bravery. However, the censorship of Let There Be Light, which was withheld for 35 years, revealed how powerful and unsettling his work truly was. Decades later, his daughter, Angelica Houston, recalled that the main movies we watched were the war documentaries. A heavy smoker throughout his life, Houston was diagnosed with emphysema in 1978. He could barely breathe for more than 20 minutes without the aid of oxygen in his final years. He passed away on August 28, 1987, at the age of 81 due to pneumonia, a complication of his lung disease. Throughout his life, Houston was close friends with notable figures such as George Hodel, Ernest Hemingway, and Humphrey Bogart, the latter of whom he delivered a moving eulogy for at his funeral. Number 5. Lavender marriages. During the golden age of Hollywood, actors and actresses rose to fame, but only if they tailored their images to the demands of the big studios that bankrolled them. To save their careers, queer actors had to either hide in the closet or marry a person of the opposite sex in a sham union known as a lavender marriage. Ever heard of it? No? Well, we're not surprised. It was one of Hollywood's best-kept secrets. These marriages were strategically arranged by Hollywood studios, often between gay, lesbian, or bisexual individuals, to conceal their true sexual orientations from the public eye. And guess what? They date back to the early 20th century. The sham unions were largely a solution to the moral clauses imposed by studios, which allowed them to cut an actor's salary should his public image get tarnished by behavior deemed unacceptable, including any hint of non-heteronormative relationships. One of the first rumored lavender marriages was the 1919 marriage between silent film star and early heartthrob Rudolph Valentino and actress Jean Acker, who was said to be a lesbian. Acker reportedly had second thoughts about the marriage on their wedding night and locked Valentino out of their hotel room. The marriage ended in divorce shortly afterward. Interestingly, Valentino also married costume designer Natasha Rambova in 1923, around the time his career was rising, with roles that were less traditionally masculine, like the 1924 film Monsieur Beaucaire. The marriage ended in 1925, leading to heated speculations that Valentino was indeed using his relationship with sex symbols to keep his reputation intact. That said, some queer actors chose to live openly, despite the risks involved. One of the first to do so was William Haynes, a popular actor in the 1920s and 30s who refused to conceal his relationship with his partner, Jimmy Shields. Haynes was contracted with MGM, and though their relationship was known among Hollywood insiders, it wasn't until later in his career that he was given a harsh ultimatum: marry a woman or be dropped from MGM. Unwilling to kiss the studio's boot, Haynes chose to leave Hollywood behind to create a successful interior design business with his partner. Today, Haynes is often remembered as one of Hollywood's first openly gay stars. As the gay rights movement grew in the 1960s and 70s, especially after the Stonewall riots of 1969, the pressure to hide one's sexuality began to fade, but people like Haynes will always be remembered for their bravery. Speaking of bodacious memories from old Hollywood, here's another unforgettable night tale we'll never forget.
Rita Moreno and West Side Story.
Number 4. Rita Moreno and Marlon Brando's toxic 8-year relationship. The whole world watched in awe when Rita Moreno, a Puerto Rican-born American performer, earned the rare and prestigious EGOT title, joining a select group of individuals who have won an Emmy, Grammy, Oscar, and Tony. Marlon Brando was no slouch either. He became a cinematic legend for his iconic roles in films like A Streetcar Named Desire and The Godfather, which earned him the distinction of being the 4th greatest male movie star by the American Film Institute. In the early days of their rising careers, fate brought Rita Moreno and Marlon Brando together, sparking a passionate relationship filled with both romance and drama. Their connection was so intense that at one point it even put Moreno's life in jeopardy. Despite the turmoil, their undeniable chemistry kept pulling them back together, leading to an on-again, off-again 8-year relationship filled with more scandal than affection. Though Brando passed away in 2004 from pulmonary fibrosis, Moreno, who was married to Leonard Gordon from 1965 until his death in 2010, still views Brando as a significant influence in her life, but not entirely in a good way. Marlon Brando was a serial cheater, and he wasn't secretive about it. His acting talent was rivaled only by his insatiable erotic appetite, which wasn't limited to women. By the early 1950s, he was rumored to have had hundreds of affairs with both men and women, though this should be taken with a pinch of salt. He married his wives only when they became pregnant, yet fathered several illegitimate children. If he was involved with one person, it was likely that he had multiple others waiting in the wings at any given time. The pain was overwhelming for Moreno, who openly expressed how Brando's physical infidelities and emotional betrayals nearly shattered her spirit. Yet, she couldn't resist the allure he held over her. In fact, she found herself addicted to the challenge of continually trying to win him over. Wondering how she did it? Among her many schemes to capture his attention, one of the most infamous was dating other men. She first tried it with Dennis Hopper and then with Elvis Presley, knowing that nothing would make Marlon Brando more jealous. However, her passion with Presley didn't compare to what she shared with Brando. She craved the sadistic back-and-forth arguments and the toxicity of the relationship. And with that, she went back to Brando again. That being said, both sides were equally toxic. Moreno certainly felt betrayed by his cheating scandals, but she herself confessed that she would have left him had he proposed and settled down. She was attracted to his unattainability. It was certainly a complicated relationship. However, their relationship hit a devastating low when Rita became pregnant with his child. Marlon, coldly indifferent, arranged for an illegal abortion and then ignored her while she recovered. The worst part? Moreno found out the fetus was still inside of her and had to be removed surgically at the hospital. Instead of offering sympathy, Brando expressed anger that the person who performed the abortion had wronged him. The heartthrobs later reconciled, but the cycle repeated itself when Rita found out she was pregnant again. Brando's response was just as cold and shocking as before. He immediately arranged for another abortion, showing little regard for what she was enduring. Despite the emotional roller coaster, Brando and Moreno remained significant figures in each other's lives. Over time, Brando became close with Moreno, her partner Gordon, and their daughter, Fernanda "Nandy" Gordon. Moreno also credits Brando for introducing her to therapy, which she now considers a life-changing decision. Until the end of Brando's life, they stayed in touch, though Moreno never initiated contact. She shared that their connection became more of a telephone friendship, with Brando doing all the calling, while she never reached out to him. Given their tumultuous past, it's hard to imagine that dynamic. But hey, if that's how she remembers it, who am I to argue? If you've made it this far, chances are you're loving today's video. So why don't you smash the subscribe button and turn on post notifications to ensure you won't be left out whenever we release an even better video. If you love stories of old Hollywood's unforgettable shows, iconic actors, and spine-tingling exposés, then what are you waiting for? Subscribe already. It'll only take you a second.
You grew up thinking you didn't have
Oh, I
value?
grew up filled with self-loathing because I was Puerto Rican. When you're little and you're told you're not worth.
Number 3. Old Hollywood racism. Since its early days, Hollywood has largely been dominated by white male filmmakers and producers, with a focus on appealing to a largely white audience. Sadly, various tactics over the years, such as whitewashing and ethnic stereotyping, have been employed to portray non-white characters. Films frequently included themes that reinforced white supremacy and xenophobic attitudes, mirroring the prevalent societal views of the time. As race relations have evolved, so too has the representation, though traces of these earlier biases can still be seen in changing forms. In any case, the silent film era was easily the darkest era of racial discrimination in the industry. Any black performers seen in films from the 1890s to the 1920s were portrayed through the white perspective and confirmed stereotypes that abounded at the time. Black characters were often portrayed in demeaning roles, such as clowns or servants, and in more extreme cases, as menacing figures. One of the most notorious examples is D.W. Griffith's The Birth of a Nation. Released in February 1915, the film depicted the Ku Klux Klan as heroic figures who restored order and protected American values, while African Americans were seen as dangerous, mindless, and lustful savages through the use of blackface. This contributed to the resurgence of the Ku Klux Klan in November 1915 and an increase in racial violence against African Americans across the nation. And guess what? The sadistic practice went beyond the black community. In the silent film era, Native American characters were often silent or rarely given lines. With the advent of synchronized sound in the 1930s, their portrayal took on new distortions. Characters spoke a fabricated, foreign-sounding language that was usually not an authentic native language, further alienating native audiences and deepening stereotypes. In some cases, English dialogue was recorded in reverse and then reprinted, creating an artificial Indian language that added to the misrepresentation. While black and native actors faced outright exclusion and stereotyping, Asians were also cast in discriminatory roles, often limited to demeaning stereotypes like villains, exotic seductresses, or mystics. Even worse, white actors in yellowface commonly played Asian roles, perpetuating harmful caricatures. Asian actors rarely found meaningful parts, and if they did, these roles rarely allowed authentic expression of Asian identities or stories. The 1920s to 30s was also an era of strict racial codes, where ethnic minorities were denied the same opportunities as white actors. And while some stars shone through, they still endured appalling treatment behind the scenes. Remember Hattie McDaniel? Of course you do. The icon rose to fame in the 1930s as a character actress, often cast in mammy roles that perpetuated stereotypes about black women in domestic servant positions. Her most iconic role came with Gone with the Wind, 1939, where her portrayal of a housemaid earned her the 1940 Academy Award for Best Supporting Actress, making her the first African-American Oscar winner. Despite this groundbreaking achievement, McDaniel still faced segregation that night. She was barred from sitting with the rest of the cast and had to be given special permission to enter the hotel and accept her award. And how about the beautiful Dorothy Dandridge? Best remembered for her stunning performance in the 1954 musical Carmen Jones, where she portrayed the free-spirited title character, Dandridge earned her an Academy Award nomination for Best Actress. She was the first African-American woman to ever be nominated in this category. But despite her immense talent, Dandridge struggled to secure significant roles in Hollywood due to the racial barriers of the time. She also faced personal hardships that ultimately led to her tragic death at the age of 42. Nina Mae McKinney faced her own set of racial challenges, though in a different way than many of her contemporaries. As one of the first African-American actresses to make a mark in Hollywood during the 1930s, she was often cast in roles that reinforced Hollywood's colorism. Her light skin made her more palatable to mainstream audiences, and she was often cast as the desirable African-American woman, a representation that overlooked darker-skinned actresses. This practice contributed to a color cast in Hollywood, where the appeal of African-American actresses was largely based on their skin tone. Appalled by Hollywood's deepest secret so far? Just wait till you hear about the final duo. Number 2. The real reason why Marilyn Monroe stuttered. Few Hollywood actors have been as famous as Marilyn Monroe. Even 62 years after her death, she remains a popular cultural icon. Known for her striking beauty, sultry voice, and iconic roles, Monroe captured the hearts of millions. Her fame reached its zenith with unforgettable performances in 1959's Some Like It Hot and The 7-Year Itch in 1955 that not only earned her numerous accolades, but also solidified her claim as one of the most memorable actresses in film history. Despite her glittering career, Monroe was more than just a pretty face. She was an actress who longed for intellectual stimulation and aspired to be taken seriously as an artist. Her pursuit of this led her to study at the Actors Studio in New York, where she cultivated her craft. But behind the scenes, Monroe struggled with a very real and hidden aspect of her life: her speech impediment. Yes, the blonde bombshell is fondly remembered for her breathy, soft-spoken voice, but many don't even realize why she actually stuttered. While many speculated that her extreme difficulties with speech and fluency were caused by conditions like dyslexia, the reality was rooted in something dark, very dark. Marilyn was abused by a boarder in their home when she was 8. She ran to tell her mother about it, but the words wouldn't come. This psychological childhood trauma began several decades of speech impediment. Her stuttering became so severe that it often hindered her ability to finish her sentences. In a 1955 conversation with American columnist Maurice Zolotow, she reflected on her struggle, saying that she had given up talking for a long while. She also talked about how she was deeply embarrassed in school and lived in constant dread of being called on by the teacher. She feared anything she said would be wrong or foolish, leading her to avoid speaking altogether. It is really sad how one of the most iconic actresses in Hollywood history struggled so much. Her mother struggled with severe mental health issues, and given the genetic predisposition to such conditions, it was likely that Monroe would face similar challenges in her own life, a reality she eventually did. Even her addiction to sleep medication stemmed from the lemons life threw at her. Marilyn's personal life was marred by a series of heartbreaking challenges, including multiple miscarriages, abandonment by several husbands and partners, and deep emotional trauma. These struggles were compounded by her ongoing battle with insomnia, which led her to rely on medication to help her sleep. Over time, this dependency escalated into a full-blown addiction. Number 1. Judy Lewiss's real father. Imagine growing up without knowing that your father was not only one of the most beloved stars of Hollywood's most cherished era, but also one of the most iconic actors of the Golden Age. It sounds like the stuff of dreams or a script from an old movie, right? Well, for Judy Lewiss, this wasn't just a hypothetical scenario. It was her reality. Unbeknownst to her, her father was the legendary Clark Gable, and her mother, her real mother, was the stunning Loretta Young. The twist? Judy had no idea who they really were, at least not until much later in life. Rather than being embraced by Hollywood's finest, Judy Lewiss spent 19 months in hideaways and orphanages, all because her young mother was hungry for stardom but unwilling to own up to her unwed pregnancy. But here's the kicker. Judy's favorite childhood movies were Call of the Wild and Gone with the Wind, 2 films that starred her own parents. Talk about a twist of fate. How could this child not know that the faces she adored on the screen were those of her own family? Born in 1935, her mother, Loretta Young, was one of the most glamorous actresses of the 1930s and 40s. But at the height of her career, she had a brief affair with Gable during the filming of The Call of the Wild in 1935. It was a passionate and short-lived romance, and when Loretta found herself pregnant, she decided to keep the identity of her child's father a secret. As soon as Judy was born in November 1935, she was turned over to a series of caretakers, including St. Elizabeth's Infants Hospital in San Francisco, so that Loretta Young could return to stardom. At 19 months old, Judy Lewiss was brought back home by her mother, who announced through gossip columnist Luella Parsons that she had adopted the child. Growing up in Los Angeles, she was surrounded by the luxury of her so-called adopted mother's movie star lifestyle. However, despite this privilege, Lewiss often felt like an outsider within her own family and faced teasing from other children at school. Lest I forget, the reason Judy took the name Lewiss is because Loretta Young married radio producer Tom Lewis and had 2 children with him. However, her biological connection to Clark Gable was never officially acknowledged within the family. But here's where things get interesting. As a child, Lewiss was teased about her Dumbo-esque ears, which were, ironically, like Clark Gable's. Surprise, surprise. To hide them, Loretta dressed Lewiss in bonnets until she was old enough to safely undergo surgery to make her ears less prominent. Still, the truth about Judy's father remained secret for many years until Judy approached her mother as an adult, at which point Loretta Young officially accepted Judy as her real daughter and admitted that Clark Gable was her father. Although Loretta Young privately admitted the truth to her daughter and later to other family members, she remained silent about it in public. She only agreed to acknowledge the fact in her authorized biography, Forever Young, based on the condition that it be published posthumously. Judy Lewiss, however, revealed the truth about her parentage in her own memoir, Uncommon Knowledge, which was published in 1994. In it, she described the deep sense of alienation she felt as a child, particularly due to her mother's refusal to publicly acknowledge her as her biological daughter. Following its release, Loretta Young refused to speak to her daughter for 3 years. Quite funny, don't you think? Well, there you have it, 10 of Hollywood's best kept secrets about its legendary icons. If you found this video as amazing as we did, hit the like button and tell us in the comments which Hollywood secret surprised you the most. But don't leave just yet, there's still more to discover. Be sure to check out the video currently displaying on your screen.